It has been widely expected, and today the federal government confirms all COVID-19 border measures are being lifted, or they will be as of Saturday. It means mandatory masking, testing, quarantine, and isolation requirements are gone, and the ArriveCan app, the one referred to in that clip there, becomes optional as well. The move comes after months of calls to do so from the opposition and border town officials. Here to talk a bit more about the rationale behind it, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino. Hi, Minister Mendicino. Good to have you here in studio.
Thank you for having me.
I have a whole bunch of questions about this, but I did want to start off just in your capacity representing the federal government on what our audience was just listening to from Premier Houston and Premier Furey about the recovery efforts underway in Atlantic Canada. And more specifically, it's not your portfolio specifically. I know it's Minister Unnens with Defence, but if there is a requirement for additional military help beyond what's already being provided, is that possible? Like, does the capacity exist to supply more military help to Atlantic Canada?
Well, I know Minister Ananda has been in close contact with her provincial partners in the regions affected in East Quebec and Atlantic Canada. And as you heard today and throughout, we will be there for all Canadians who've been impacted. That includes deploying Canadian Armed Forces personnel. 100 have already been sent there to assist. There is a matching program under the Canadian Red Cross program. There's disaster relief federal funding, which is being sent to all of the impacted provinces. I've been in touch with a number of my Atlantic counterparts, including Premier Houston, Premier Furey. I was watching very closely off the top. The devastation is incalculable, and our hearts go out to everyone who has been impacted, but the federal government will continue to work around the clock to make sure that they get the relief and the support around restoration of power, recovery, and ultimately rebuilding.
Okay, Minister, I appreciate that. Let's switch gears to the topic you're here for, and that is the announcement today around lifting the measures at the border. I interviewed a number of your colleagues 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and they insisted at the time those measures were in place in order to stay ahead of the virus and to make sure they were aware of any new variants coming into Canada. What is different from 3 months ago and today?
Well, as you heard Minister Duclos say, our public health minister, we're in a much stronger position as a result of a world-leading vaccination campaign. Over 80% took the first 2 doses. A significant number got their 3rd dose. And as part of a long-term strategy, we hope that Canadians will continue to keep their vaccinations up to date. As a result of their sacrifices, we've been able to ease measures incrementally, responsibly at the border. And today, what you heard is the government announced that we will be lifting all COVID-19 health measures at the border, including the mandatory requirement of ArriveCan, which will now become optional on a go forward.
And I have to, with great respect, though, challenge you on the idea that all of a sudden, over the last 3 months, vaccination rates have greatly changed, and now we're in an environment where people are okay, or the situation is much different. On May 31st, when I interviewed Minister Alghabra, your colleague in transport, he provided that justification to me. The percentage of Canadian adults who were double vaccinated was 82.6%. Today, it's 83.1%. How is that different?
Well, look, I mean, it's first in the actual quantum, it's gone up, and that's a good thing. And we continue to encourage Canadians to stay up to date. So as you heard Minister Duclos say, he used the metaphor of keeping the batteries charged, which is, I think, something that Canadians can get their heads wrapped around. So that base of support and the ongoing uptake of boosters, including the new vaccinations, which will be more resistant and effective in combating the Omicron variant, will give us that additional protection. But as it stands today, and throughout the pandemic, we have always used the best science and evidence available to the government to take decisions around the measures at the border. And what you heard today was that we would be lifting all COVID-19 health measures, including the mandatory use of ArriveCan, which will be optional on a go forward. This is good news. It's good news for trade. It's good news for travel. It's good news for people who want to see their families. And it's especially good news for those border communities with whom I have remained in very close touch over the last number of months on this issue.
But again, with respect, it would have been great news for them 3 months ago at the start of tourism season, right? That's what they were asking specifically for. You're being accused by your critics of making this decision at this point and not 3 months ago because it was politically expedient for you. Do you have the scientific justification? Do you actually think you've provided Canadians with a scientific justification for keeping those measures in place for the last 3 months? Was it just a 0.5% increase in the vaccination uptake?
Well, the short answer is yes, and we've always used evidence and science to guide our decisions, but we're taking no lessons from conservatives who themselves, Vashi, and you will know this because you put questions to them, flip-flopped on whether or not we should keep leave borders open or closed, who flipped up on urging us to get vaccinations here more quickly, and then became very weak and inconsistent on whether or not we should use mandates, which is one of the tools that we used to see the high uptake that has given us the additional protection. So if anybody has been politicizing the decision, trying to exploit what has been a very challenging period for all Canadians, it's been the Conservatives, whereas we've been consistent, and we will continue to be going forward.
And I think the questions you raise about the Conservatives' positions are completely valid. And you're right, I do put them to them. But I'm here to put those questions, or it doesn't really abdicate your government from answering questions on the same subject. What scientific evidence is there to show that today the situation is completely different, that the borders don't matter the way they did 3 months ago? Do you actually think you have provided Canadians with enough evidence to make them believe this isn't political for you too?
Well, look, as I said, we have always consulted healthcare experts, including doctors, including epidemiologists, and we've always tried to be very careful in taking decisions, not in a lurchy way, but rather in an incremental and responsible way. And by the way, I do want to acknowledge that at times it has been very frustrating for Canadians. I think in my own conversations, people have wanted to get back to life as normal. You have, I have, but we also have a broader obligation. And that obligation is to place as a paramount value and objective the health and safety of Canadians. And so today we're in a position to do what I acknowledge people wanted us to do in some cases sooner, but we will continue to use evidence and science as our North Star in these decisions.
And I understand the point you're making and the primacy of science in keeping Canadians safe. The average number of cases, new cases a week on May 31st, when your government was saying this was about making sure new variants didn't come here and staying ahead of the virus, 2,674. The average number of weekly cases today, 2,674. The vaccination rate, as I pointed out, went up 0.5% in those 3 months. Dr. New today is warning of an uptick in cases and saying masks are still strongly recommended. Do you understand how Canadians would believe your decision today is politically, not scientifically motivated?
Well, look, and I think put another way from some of your colleagues, people have been asking, whether or not COVID-19 is over, if I could distill it. And, my response to that is that the healthcare measures related to COVID-19 are over at the border. But what is not over is each individual's responsibility to continue to keep their vaccinations up to date. What is not over is everyone's collective responsibility to act sensibly when you have symptoms or you become positive to COVID-19, to either stay home, not travel, isolate, mask. That is a responsibility that I think that we will all continue to take up. And in the meantime, continue to be very vigilant around the decisions that we take at the border. And at the front end, yes, we did close the border. Yes, that did buy us the time that we needed to develop a vaccine, to make sure that we put out a campaign.
With great respect, that's not what I'm asking about. I'm asking what the difference in the science was over 3 months to prove to Canadians, as you're contending, this is not politics.
We've made progress, and you yourself have acknowledged that we've seen more Canadians take up vaccinations. We are more positioned, I think, to put in place the individual responsible decisions that are taken up by all of us to make sure that if we have symptoms or if we become contagious or indeed if we're positive, that we're better positioned to manage all that. And I think, look, at the end of the day, we will follow evidence and science to take the decisions, whether it relates to the border or whether it relates to any other aspect, and that's what I think Canadians expect us to do.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. Thank you for your time as always. I appreciate it. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.